that make our arts programs, our exhibitions possible. And also free program we're doing in connection with the exhibit this year. And then of course, all of our members and our other supporters, sponsors. So sponsors, Comfort Keepers is our official art sponsor. Winifred Johnson Clyde Foundation supported our summer programming, as well as Boyne Boatyard and Van Dam. Michigan Arts and Culture Council, National Endowment for the Arts, and Bayview. So we're really grateful for also for the in-kind support from many community partners. So I'm so excited about this Tom's talk today about this. I've seen a few slides in other presentations that Tom's done. He is really an adventurer, and I'm super excited on this rainy Thursday to hear his talk about this 1,000-mile solo trip around Lake Superior. So I think a lot of you know Tom. He's an author who writes under the name of Stuart James. He's an artist, an adventurer exploring in his kayak, hiking with his backpack, or biking national parks from Alaska to Maine. And after more than a dozen close encounters with bears in the backcountry, he's thinking he's lucky to have lived past the 9 lives stage. He's retired and resides in Petoskey with his wife, Christine. And so join me in welcoming Tom.
So to clarify what you have in your hand, those papers. So as I've done this talk for years around the state and television stations and radio, I have found at times these are the chapter headings from my journals. And as I go through this, I actually have done it either just this or I've done just that. But as I go through this today, we'll experiment. So if I ask questions as I go, it's better than wait until the end. But a lot of those chapter headings, people are so curious about as I go through the talk, just ask me one and I'll tell you what it's about. And it goes in order. So it starts obviously up near the Canadian border, and then it finishes at Grand Marais, Michigan. So the chapter headings follow those adventures. But if you see anything in there that's like, oh, that's kind of cool, let me know what it is, I'll let you know. Deal? Okay. And let me ask, I'll answer the first question about why. Because that's usually wherever I go, why the hell did you do this? I have a couple of harbor masters who had no idea why I was doing this. So I just did the Antiques Roadshow a couple of weeks ago. I got filmed. And why I'm bringing that up is because I wanted them to look at my great-great-grandfather's shot glass. So my great-great-grandfather, Hugh Matthews, survived Andersonville Prison during the Civil War. I'm assuming most of you know about Andersonville Prison. So Andersonville Prison was the Auschwitz of America. They loaded up a few acres with about 30,000 men, and 13,000 died in about 6 months. And when my great-great-grandfather was released in a prisoner exchange before the end of the war, he had lost 50 pounds. He was like maybe 80 pounds. It was horrid. And if you ever go down there, it's really amazing. My last national book tour, The Penny, has written a lot about that place. And it's just, now it's a great celebration of prison camps and people who survived. But anyways, that shot glass is very valuable to me because one of the reasons I did this trip is I'm the first Renkes in 4 generations to live past 60 years old. So I did this as a symbol of my 60th birthday. And I wasn't quite 60 yet, so but it was for my 60th birthday. Yes, they all smoked 3-4 packs of cigarettes a day. And even though my father lived till he was 63, he only had 1 lung and half a heart. So it wasn't a great life after, and that was 48 years old when he had his lung out. So obviously I have lived a different life as much as I could. The other reason, which I don't talk a lot about in public, but more and more I do, after years of therapy, turns out after my father died in 97, I pretty much started into this pretty reckless depression, suicidal depression. And I really didn't know about it until the therapy hit me about 50 years old. And I found out about my upbringing in Alaska before it was a state and kind of what I went through. And I won't even bore you with that. But that was the other reason I did it, to prove I can really make it through anything. So does that help? Those are 2 important things to me. So I had first thought about doing a circumnavigation on this trip, to be honest with you. We drove up to Minnesota, and first of all, there's tribal land right at the edge of the Canadian border. And, you know, some of the tribes are good about you staying on their property and some aren't. The other thing about Minnesota is it's all privately owned right to the water's edge. There's no easement, and they will chase you off. There have been DNR officers who are out on vacation getting chased off of people's property. Lots of stories. And then as I went on this trip, I curtailed it mostly because if you remember in 2018, that was the worst weather the UP had experienced in a couple hundred years. And I'll show you some pictures of what happened before I got to the UP and where I was when the storms went over. Ready to go? Okay. So this is where I started. So if you'll see way up, I can't leave the mic, way up on the top left up there, you're right. That's where the tribal land is in yellow. So we went ahead and just said, you know, why don't we just do Grand Marais to Grand Marais? You know, my kids have been going to Grand Marais since birth. They're all close to 40 now. So we said, yeah, let's do Grand Marais to Grand Marais. So this is me putting all this stuff in. Can I grab this with me? So just to show you what I'm packing, it all fits, believe it or not. I used the sea bags I got right over here at West Marine. I had them color coded for food, for dinner, for lunch, for my clothes, for whatever else I needed. I had, of course, my vest, my back, my pad, my tent. I have a little backpack because it turns out I also walked hundreds of miles because I had no trailing vehicle. I had nobody in front of me. I had no smartphone. I had no GPS. I didn't even have a compass because I figured if the shore isn't on the right side of me, I'm in the wrong lane. Going the wrong way. So I did this totally, I'm like very throwing, which was also purposeful because I don't really like all the social media and connections. It drives me bananas. So yes, I walked hundreds of miles just for food. So that little backpack, I always carry my food when I would ever find it somewhere. I had my 2 tubes of peanut butter, first aid kit. I had my stove. So that stove I bought when I did the whole Chillicoot Gold Rush Trail from Alaska through British Columbia into the Yukon. I did that whole trail back in the 90s. That's how old that stove is. My mess kit. I have my radio. I did have a VHF radio because I wasn't stupid. And then my brother, who actually was a military spook, he started in the Coast Guard. He would tell me all the horror stories of the kayaks they'd have to rescue every year on Lake Superior. So I had my EPIRB, so I do have a beacon. So that beacon, they guarantee of finding you through a satellite within 100 feet of where the beacon is, dead or alive, within so much time. Problem is if you set it off by accident, it's a $10,000 fine. So I protect that thing, and you have to re-register it every couple of years. I mean, they're big deals. You don't want to lose those things. My gloves and my water purifier, that's a bear rope. So you always have to have a bear rope because when you're in the backcountry, no matter where you are in the country, you got to figure out there's bears. And I can only tell you, I've been from here to George over there where's George? Over there. A boar grizzly came at my son, and I got between the boar grizzly and my son and stood there, and we had a stare off. So I've had lots of bear encounters. So I'm used to carrying bear rope for my food. And then my hat, and then that sweater's as old as a stove. That sweater has kayaked in the Pacific, the Atlantic, Glacier National Park. It's even been in Walden Pond. It's got holes all over it, and my wife goes bananas because I wear it all over town. That's just me. And then, of course, my rain slicker. Those water bottles, I kid in my journals, they're as old as the Vikings, but you know, they're great. They don't leak. You can throw them against walls and they don't break. So I'm not really a new gear guy. I use stuff that just works. The clothes I have on, these pants I bought up at Josh's place at the Outfitters before I left. I am wearing a Tlingit shirt. This is from Alaska, but this is from the Southwest Passage where we went. So any questions on the gear? But that's what I took with me. So it was always when you land, it's always water first, safety of your tent, and figuring out where your kayak's going to be so you don't end up in the morning finding it somewhere out in the water, because you never know about Superior. So that's me doing that. I took the fishing rods, but when she visited me, she did visit me halfway through the trip at McLean State Park, and I gave her back the fishing rods because I was having horrible luck, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me to have them anymore. So that's where I asked her if she had the car keys, because she wasn't going to see me for a couple of months. And you see how smooth the water is? That's what I went into, and it got worse. And it got worse. This is actually a video, but I don't want to bore you with a video. So yeah, it was. She went around the corner and took some pictures. Well, she took this video of me, and I heard later she was telling her sister who came with us that she said, "I don't think that water's supposed to be that rough. I don't think that's supposed to happen." So yeah. So now I'm out of the slipstream out there, and the reason the kayak is tipped over is because I found out that I had water in the bulkheads. Well, that's not supposed to happen. This kayak weighs 75 pounds. I probably took about, I don't know, 75 pounds, 100 pounds of gear with me, and I weigh 250. So that's a lot of weight in this kayak. So it's down at the water level. I kept thinking, well, how the hell am I getting water in there? It's never happened before, never. So I drained it. I said, okay, well, let's try it again. So I finally stopped later. And again, I don't show it on here, but I found out that where the rudder's supposed to go, I've never used a rudder. I always thought it was too problematic, and I can't get to the pedals because I'm so tall in the kayak. So I just have been rudderless the whole time, kind of indicative of my life. And so I taped it up because I had duct tape. You have to have duct tape on any trip you take. Even in my backpacks, I have a small roll of duct tape. So I taped it all up and the leak stopped. Wow. Go figure. I also taped around the inside of the bulkheads in the cockpit because I wasn't sure. I had a lot of washovers that first day. So I'm thinking, well, maybe they're leaking because this kayak was from 2000. So it's old. And the other reason I use this kayak, even though it's really heavy, it's a Rolex material, it's an Old Town, is because a lot of the folks on Superior can barely use their kayaks because they get all the fancy fiberglass, but between the rocks and the boulders and the landings, they're just going to crack. So I never went there. This was a place, this was one of my rest stops on that first day, and there was a gentleman who was renting a house up this way, and he came down and I told him what I was doing. He says, you know, if you want to stay here a week, I'm renting this place. I got an extra bedroom, I got food, I got beer. He said, no, I said, it's my first day. But he was so nice. It was like, oh, cool. I got people that are looking out for me. Because I literally had no idea when I would stop what I would find. It was always, that was part of the adventure. So I also, if people who know me know I do this, I wayfind. I still rarely use GPS, except when I'm in one of the cities where the kids live, like DC or Boston. I just wayfind. If I make a wrong turn, I find something nice on that wrong turn. I look at the sun, I look at the clouds, I look at the stars, I watch the wind, and I wayfind. So that was all about this trip. So this is the first night stop. I was exhausted. It was 25 miles. And it was a place called Lutzen. And I don't know if you heard this, but last year that whole lodge, it's historic, burned down, like burned to the ground. So I was around that other point when I was truly exhausted. I saw this young woman out there, and you could tell she was frustrated. I was going by the cove, and there was like probably 15 kayaks, all tandems with people with her. I don't use a skirt either. I know people think I'm nuts, but I don't use a skirt because I'm too big. They had skirts around them. They couldn't get in their kayaks. They were turning them over. Some people were soaking wet, and this girl was just standing there like this. So I came up to her. I said, is there a campground here anywhere? She said, well, actually, right around the corner, there's a kayak camp, but I don't know where it's at. So I pulled the kayak up, and it was way up a hill. And the sign that you would see from the water, you'd already be past it, number one. Number two, it was covered by a tree. So I found it, but I was exhausted. But I went with my whole wet, exhausted self back into the lodge by the bow ties and the guys with the vests. And I walked into the bathroom and I cleaned up and I got some water. And then I went and had a Manhattan and a Caesar salad. And I thought I was going to get booted out, but I got a lot of good questions. So it was a fun night. But boy, was I was exhausted. And that was just the first night I put the tent up. So this is my tent. This also has made the trips all over the country since the Chillicoot Trail. It's a 4-season Eureka. It's amazing. It's heavy for a backpack tent. It's 7 pounds, but it goes up easy. And I fit inside with my gear. You know, it's supposed to be for 3 people, but for me, it's a 1-person tent. But it works great. And I have a rain fly. I left the rain fly off that night because I wanted to look up at the stars. So this is my usual morning routine. My oatmeal every day, my coffee, those Folger bags are perfect. My stove, the reason the stove works so well, by the way, is it takes fuel from anywhere. It takes kerosene, it takes gas, it takes whatever kind of fuel you'll throw in there, it burns. So that's a great thing to have in the backcountry. My vitamins, and then there's a lighter down here you can't see, but this little black box. So one of the healthcare companies I ran years ago, the psychologist I hired bought me that. And when I opened it with the kids around me, they said, "Dad, that's a crack lighter." Well, the hilarity of the lighter she bought me, I don't know where the hell she got it for me, but the company I was running was the very quiet CIA-ish company where we took care of all the addicted health professionals. And she bought me a crack pipe, a crack lighter. But that thing lights up anywhere. It works everywhere. So I take it with me wherever I go. So that's the morning routine. The other funny thing that happened at the beginning of the trip is with no GPS or anything, I did have maps. So I took some maps with me, and I actually used a compass to figure out how many miles all the shore miles were. I had no idea what I'd find on the stops, but at least I had an idea of where some clearings were, where some landing sites were. Well, the wife ended up with the maps in the car back in Michigan. So I was mapless. So I did have my daughter and Christine both made me get a brand new flip phone. So I did have a brand new flip phone. So I did open it on one of the stops. They said, honey, I don't have my maps. And she says, I know, I found them. So the first couple of days, I called her a couple of times and she would actually have to kind of tell me where I was. Even though I like the wayfind, the reason it was important, as you'll see, is there are no landing sites in Minnesota. It's all cliff. Wow. I mean, you think the pictured rocks or something? There's 17 and 20 miles and 25 miles of just cliffs. And the water levels are record heights. So even if there was a little berg of land out there, it was gone. It was history. And also there's no sand in Minnesota. I don't know if you knew that. Anybody here from Minnesota? Sand does not exist in this state. So this is a nice quiet day. The second day, I was able to see falls. There was a family of otters out here. I had peregrine falcons dive bombing me. I went by a cliff and I was obviously close to their nest, and I had this one came and just literally tried to rip the hat off my head. So, you know, when you're in the backcountry, you want to be observant and you want to have your Discovery Channel moments, but you also don't want to be a burden. You don't want to be damaging to the wildlife. So you only spend time when you can, and then you get the hell out of there. The other thing that I found on the second day were Minnesota, the loons are like sparrows. They're like ants. They're everywhere. And you don't chase them away. I mean, there were a few next to my kayak I could literally pet. And there's a story in the journals about how I actually learned how to kayak better watching some of the loons when it got really dangerous. Again, some quiet water, but you can see the clouds. So every day was cloudy, rainy, sunny, and foggy, the whole 9 yards. The only thing I did not experience on this trip was snow. But when I did get to the Porcupine Mountains, it got below 40 degrees a couple of nights, which I love because my bag is an Arctic bag for Alaska. So it was fine for me. This was just one of my stops. One of my sons always says, "Dad, the water's always so calm." I says, "Yes, that's when I could take a picture." So there's no pictures of rough water here until I'm off the, oh yes.
Shoreline, when you were doing your trip for 1,000 miles, you didn't try to go out into the you're on the coastline.
Later on, I went further out because of the rebound waves, which I'll get to. Rebound waves can kill you. So even the big ships, so my kids out in Boston, the billionaire kids, they go on this big yacht, 180 feet, and they've got a captain who calls it Maytag water. So I'll tell you about the Maytag water. This is, I think this was one of the state parks. I can't remember which one, but they were all inland. So you can see I can't get my kayak up here except here. So I did find a trail. I walked up to the ranger station and I said, you know, in the next few days, they're predicting storms and tornadoes over Minnesota. Can I have a spot anywhere? And he says, first of all, he was on the phone. He wouldn't get off the phone, trying to be nice. So then he finally got off the phone. He says, what can I do for you? I said, you know what? Never mind. I found a brochure of a camp a couple miles down. And then I found out later that it's actually state, at least DNR rules for Minnesota. They're supposed to find me a plot of land. Like, it doesn't matter where, they're supposed to put me up. And this guy just, he said, well, I can put you up tomorrow. I said, I'll be dead. I said, I won't be here. So I ended up at Lamb's Resort, and they were just marvelous. They put me up in this spot. I stayed here 2 nights. And why I'm showing you this nice sunny picture is this is the night all the tornadoes came over and then wrecked the UP. So I'm in my tent with my kayak, and there is no storm shelter. So the radio kept going off all night, the alarms, just, you know how they go off, just like your radio, it goes off all night. I'm like, holy shit, excuse me. So yes, I lived through the storms at this place and had no idea what I was going to encounter as I progressed at that point. This one is a nameless shoreline I found, and this was probably one of the windiest days. Again, even though the sky's clear at this point, if you look at the front of the kayak, there's a red sticker. So in Minnesota, you had to register your kayak. So that sticker, as tight as it is on there, my cheeks were going like this in the wind. I had water coming up to the edge of my cockpit, and the sticker actually started blowing off the kayak. And I would go through just miles of that. And again, now I'm along cliffs. So now I'm getting the rebound waves. So it turns out I was a moron doing it this way because I heard that everybody else comes up the other way. You know, the trailing winds from the southwest. I'm going against Mother Nature here. Where was I going with that? With the stickers and the wind? Oh, the rebound waves. So the rebound waves, when you're against the cliffs, of course, the waves hit the cliffs and then they come back at you. So now you got waves going in, you got waves coming back. And you've always got currents in Lake Superior. I mean, it's a misnomer if you think these lakes don't have currents. They have currents. So this is why the captains call it Maytag water. And I'm in a kayak and I'm this far above the water in my cockpit. So it was interesting when you're just doing this in your kayak. I mean, you're really losing control. So it's just a matter of bracing and paddling when you can, bracing and when you're paddling when you can. And this was the day where the loons taught me. So I'm going up a swell like this, and I'm coming down a swell like this. And I see this loon, and I'm seeing it as I go up, and then I don't see it when I go down. And he's like doing the opposite of me. And he's just as calm as could be. He's just swimming, and I'm just beating the water. You know, trying to stay alive. And I finally just calmed down. I just literally took a deep breath. I stopped beating the water and I found a way through the trough. It was amazing. I mean, it was just amazing. It was still frightening, but I had a whole different mindset and I just watched the loons. I just floated. I mean, I know I'm probably not going to tip over in this thing. I wasn't really worried about that. But this was the day. So when I got here, I was exhausted. The other thing I found out this time of year, this is July, early July, the stable flies on the beach were so thick you can't stand out here. So when I would eat, I'd have to walk probably 4 or 5 feet or where I was up to here in the water and eat my food. I would just hold it up and eat because the stable flies were so bad. And then I'd dive in and out of my tent so they wouldn't get in the tent. This is just the same, but you see the rocks that coming in. So the other thing about these, when the storms would come up and the swells, it's like a big washing machine. So outside of the Maytag water, now you got that water swirling in these coves and just rushing out the other side. So you may go into a cove smooth and you come out the other way and you're just battling the swells as you go through. So the Palisades are cool. But again, if you've never been up to Minnesota, we always talk about the picture rocks. I'm telling you, it's amazing. And it's like this the whole way. Obviously, I didn't take this shot. I got a few of these. But yeah, so you're just kayaking by this. And in a Thoreau, in a Robert Service sort of way, being from Alaska, you know, you really feel like you're out in the wilderness. Like there is nobody around. You really are on your own out there. And I'm a big Robert Service fan. I took him with me on this trip. So you feel that way. But as you traverse, see again all the cliffs, there's no place to land. So when the water comes up, you're out there. I did go through the arch, which was cool. That is a picture I took. But you see, on the throwing side of the adventure, because this kayak has been in Walden Pond. That was one of the neatest adventures of my life, taking this to Walden Pond. On the throwing side, if you ever read a lot of Thoreau and you read Walden, of course, you know that there are always people around. Everybody always thinks he was out there on his own, but no, he had visitors, he had fishermen, he had people he talked to, he went into town, he had the railroad. So even though I'm down here thinking I'm Robert Service, you know, when you get these shots, there's, you know, gazillion-dollar homes up there. So now I have traversed some of the worst water I could imagine. I've been through the wind. I never kayaked in actual storms until later in the trip because on the North Shore of Minnesota, I literally would have just died. I mean, I got caught in wind, I got caught in 4-foot swells, I got caught in whitecaps, but I managed them and I learned from the loons to get my way through the water. So this is now Silver Bay. This is where Christine sent the maps to a post office. So I get to Silver Bay and I'm thinking, you know, there was a place way over here. I said, maybe I should stop there and get off. It was like a mine tailing beach. So there's a lot of mining up there, you know. So it was all gray beach. I thought, no, I'll go to the harbor. Well, it turns out I should have stayed where I was because I was like half a mile from the post office. So I made my way around the harbor. I got in the harbor. And now I'm 2.5 miles from the post office. So now I got to figure out how to get there. So I pull up, and you can't see, but behind those trees, I'm on shore, and the harbor master, there's his quarters right there. So I get off, I'm, you know, okay, I made it. It wasn't an easy trip, but I made it. Because when you go through those breakwaters, you're getting all the rebound waves again. And now I got to get to the post office. So suddenly my phone rings. I got to find it because I have no idea where I put it. And Christine says, you got 20 minutes to get to the post office. And I'm like, huh, crap, I hadn't even had breakfast yet. So I had gotten my breakfast stuff out. So there was a couple in a van enjoying their cappuccinos in the back of their van. And they said, well, we can get you there in a bit, but we're not going to rush. I said, no problem. So then I said, no, I got to get there. So I started walking up this road, and there was a little ranger person. Looks like she was 19, probably, you know, right in college. And as I kept talking to her, she kept rolling her window up. So I'm not lying. Because I mean, if you could see me when I'm done with these days, I'm just a mess. You know, I got my hat, my vest, the holy sweater, and she's looking at me like, what do you want? So I just said, can you drive me into town? And she went, no. Yeah, and she just drove off. So then she says, you'll make it. It's just a couple miles up. And I said, I had to tell her 3 times I didn't have a car. So then she says, it's just up the road. Well, you can see there's like 4 roads there. I'm like, what road? So I finally got up to the highway and I'm in my sandals and I literally like almost ran the 2.5 miles up to the post office. So that's the first time my feet started really bothering me. I had stone bruises, and it turns out my left foot is still permanently damaged from that trip. But near the end of the day, when I came back to the harbor master hugged me. It turns out the year before somebody tried the same trip the way I did it, and all they found was his kayak. So he hugged me. He was almost in tears. I was in tears. But I realized that all the stuff I was living through, I thought I was just being hyperbole, like I was not really good at this. And he said, no, you're lucky you're here. So then I was at the harbor, and it's like 2 miles. There's no campground. You can't stay at the harbor. The other thing in Minnesota, which is weird, is they say you can kayak this trail they've got, but you can't stay at the harbors. He says, I'm sorry, I can't let you camp here. It's against the law. They'll come and they'll take you away. And plus, and I'm sorry to bring this up, but it was the reality. Everywhere I went on this trip was that guy's first term in office. And every place I got off where there was a harbor or a roadway, there was a new sign that says, report people, you know, to the immigration department. All over. I'm like, are you serious? What do they think? They're going to come down in a kayak with a machine gun? So they were even more so about not letting people stay at the harbors. So I called up a guy who was at a local store. He does trail transport for people up and down the backpacking trail on the other side. So he put my kayak in his truck, and a mile down the road, I stayed at Cove Lodge. And they said, our air conditioning's out. I said, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. So this is just another spot. I don't know. I was trying to be artistic with this picture, but you can see the cliff again. It was just constant, just constant. So now this is Split Rock. So I didn't take this picture, but why I've showed you this is that's a dive boat. I came around from one of my stops. Well, it was a cove, and I came down. There was a few stops. There were some parks or some nature trails I stopped at to eat. So suddenly it's fog. I can't see 5 feet in front of me. So I'm hearing one horn. One horn. Because the weather was so bad during the course of the days, there were no boats out there except me. I hear this horn, and I see the ship finally kind of break the fog in the cove I was in, and it went by. I'm like, all right, I'll wait till it's gone. So I didn't hear it anymore. I didn't hear you. If you're out there, you can hear the rumbles of these motors miles away. So I round Split Rock Lighthouse, and where that boat is right there, the fog was so thick, I was 4 feet in front behind it, and I almost hit it. And yeah, it was like, whoa. So the fog was clearing, but yeah, that was a dive boat. They were all getting ready to dive, and there's a shipwreck right underneath. So that was one of the first times I went over a shipwreck and thought, what the hell am I doing? You know, it was disconcerting. You know, dead bodies and ships, and here I am in a piece of plastic. And these are freighters and old coal carriers and iron carriers. This was just a juxtaposition in the weather. Within several minutes, it went from this to this, and it just would clear up. So now I'm at Thompson Beach. This was the first kayak camp that was actually marked. And if you had a GPS, you probably knew it was there because it had a GPS number and everything. But so here I got off. 2 storms went over me while I was here, and I also had a pack of coyotes around my tent all night, which I thought was hysterical. I mean, I've lived around the worst of the animals you can imagine, and I always crack up when people say, you know, wolves and coyotes will eat you. It's like, no, they don't. They don't. Just stop. So the coyotes just get around you, they howl a lot, and then they take off. But at this place, what was interesting is this area right here was actually on I don't know if it was a Nova. I think it was Nova. They filmed part of a Nova right behind me. There's a trail. So in Minnesota, some of the oldest rocks they can find are here. They're like billions of years old. And part of the Nova episode discussed these cliffs and the rocks I went by. Hi, Eric. My mailman just walked in. So that was a great stay. I had a great campground, and it was a privy. You know how nice it is to have a privy? That's like gold mine. So that was just how I would sit. I had my water bottle, I had my pillow. This pillow I took with me was great because it would help my back in the kayak, and I used it obviously in the tent. And I would just sit, and I just would write. I write and I would read. That's what I did. And I watched nature. I'd watch ants, like birds, whatever. Now I'm at Gooseberry Falls, which was a lifesaver because before Gooseberry Falls, I had a couple of miles of 5-foot swells. So my kayak's going up on one and crashing down as I come down. But they weren't breaking, so I was safe. For me, I was safe. But I finally camped here, and I found that they had 2 kayak spots. And the ranger came down at one point, and he was like startled. And I guess I'm like the only one who's used these in 2 years. Nobody had done this. But it was wonderful. That's where the kayak was. This is where I became like a Thoreau. I was on the walking trail through Gooseberry Falls State Park. They had 1 million visitors there in Minnesota, and people would come by and want to know all about my car. Yes. I have no idea. It just depended. I went when I could go. I did 50 miles and I did 10 miles. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, that was Silver Bay. Oh yes, I did, because I would go. Yeah, it's all about living with the elements and the rhythms. Yeah, that's as far as you could plan. So this was like a camp, like Hartwick Pines, a CCC camp. So all the buildings there, isn't that gorgeous? So I would kayak up and down on a couple of days when it was nice. I went up and down. South of Gooseberry Falls, there were several books written about this that I had read before I went. I actually had to get another ride from the guy who took me to Cove Lodge, because south of Gooseberry Falls is 20 miles toward Duluth. It's all private land and cliff. And it's all 3M money, Pillsbury money. And it's like kind of like the Huron Mountain Club. There's threats of guns and people chasing you off the shore. So when I talked to the Rangers, they said, you just need to get down to Duluth. Just get to Duluth however you can. So the guy put my kayak back in the truck and we went down to Duluth. But I did kayak up and down a lot of that 20 miles. I just didn't stay anywhere. Um, uh, so then I got down to the St. Louis River, which is south of Duluth. I was 10 miles south of Duluth on the St. Louis River, which is, I think, Lake Superior's largest tributary. It's full of ore boats. It's dark water, old pilings. It's very dangerous, but the campground was cool. But here it stormed 2 more nights. I did order a Domino's pizza from town. And to go into town, my feet were so sore from Silver Bay, I would take the bus. I would just went out there and take the bus. It's so cool. You just find a way to do your thing. I went shopping, and I ended up sitting next to this older woman next to me. Older, I mean, I know I'm older, but we're talking like my mother's age, 90, 95. And she had red lipstick and a cigarette. She kept winking at me. No lie. I was very nice. I just sat there next to her and I ate my lunch and then I got back on the bus. Yeah. So this little guy kept walking by my kayak and he just wanted, so I finally said, just get in, I'll take your picture. Trouble is, I forgot his name in the journals. I didn't write it down. So now I've got to get up through Wisconsin. So my hope is that I'd get off the rocks and I'd get off the pebbles and I'd find sand and I'd find some quiet water. Well, I didn't. I went up through the St. Louis River. I went through the channel of Superior and Duluth, and the water got really bad. This is nothing compared to what it got to earlier. And there were this like freighter after freighter coming out. So I just stopped. I went through a whole storm that rained all night this night. And some woman came up with her grandchild and she said, what happened to the 100 yards of beach? I said, ma'am, I have no idea. I've never been here. But apparently there used to be 100 yards of beach way up that breakwater, and it was gone. So there's another one of the freighters. There's my tent that night in the grass. Now I made it out of that area. Now I've got to go up to Port Wing. This is one of the 50-mile days. So now I've got to get up to Port Wing. So I'm thinking, okay, sand, shallow water. Well, as you can see the mud coming down over there on your right? Wisconsin had the same storms and there were entire forests that went crashing down into the water. So I had no more places to land in Wisconsin than I did in Minnesota, which was totally unexpected. I had just no idea. So I don't know why I took that picture. So now I made it up to Port Wing, and why this is important quickly. I know I always go over, sorry. I get to Port Wing, and just before this, I helped a guy get his 20-foot powerboat out of the water at a launch that he shouldn't have been at. I soaked my pants, my wallet got wet, my phone got wet. I was actually going to try to find some place to stay because I had no idea where I was. And a guy came down. I went up to a house. I said, I need to get to someplace. He says, yeah, it's a mile up the road. And he closed the door. And I went, okay. I went back down to my kayak. The picnic table there had grass above the picnic table. So you can tell nobody's ever been there before. So he finally walks down a little bit later. He says, you need a ride, don't you? I said, yeah, can you take me the mile? And so he did. He took me to Port Wing. So Stacy Jardine, her family has owned this marina forever. She said, stay as long as you want. So just to show you where my tent is, the water is like 40 feet below the ridge down there, and it's another 40 feet out. During the storms that past October and the one that went over me in Minnesota, the water would have been past my tent. That's how bad it got. Her father-in-law was also on the Anderson, who went to look maybe for the Edmund Fitzgerald, but it was voted down by the captain. I don't know if you ever heard that story. Yeah, that was her father-in-law. So this is me drying out. More maps. This is just the back of their thing. That's one of the ways that's 2 miles into town where I had to go to the IGA and get my food. So the backpack. So yes, I'm walking again. Just a sky shot. This is all the forest coming down into the water from the storms. Now I'm getting in closer to the Apostle Islands. So I'm getting into all the rock in Wisconsin. Sea caves, different shots. Now I'm at Herbster Beach. This is the beach where if you went to the University of California at Berkeley, or you were like my wife as a hippie in the 70s, this is your beach. This is where all the people in Minnesota came up to smoke their pot and take their drugs and enjoy the sunshine, and then they leave. I thought it was cool. So that bench, I have no idea how old it was, but yeah, here I am. It was a beautiful stay. But see what happened from the storm? That used to be a road. So the road in was gone. They had one little two-track that left the little area there for people. So yes, this now I'm starting to see what I'm running into. Gorgeous night. There was a guy from Belarus there that night who stayed next to me. He wanted to look for the northern lights. He never saw them, but that whole night he kept drinking, and I kept hearing stories about gulags when he grew up in Soviet Russia. That was interesting. Now, this is cornucopia. This is where I literally almost died. So this looks very calm because I took this picture after the most hellacious day on the water. I'm going up a big point, Bark Point, and into this bay. And I'm literally now in water where I have no control of the kayak. The rebound waves are horrible. I got wind coming from two different directions. It's literally swirling. My kayak is almost spinning at times. And I'm just going up wave after wave, and I kept remembering the loon. I just kept remembering the loon. So I pulled in way up there, miles up on the edge of the bay. I pulled in and I found a boat launch, just this random boat launch. And there was a restroom again. I kept running into restrooms. But this is where I got out of my kayak. I literally kissed the dirt, all muddy. I pulled out the flip phone. I called Christine. She was running North Country Community Mental Health at the time as the CEO. So she's busy. And she answers the phone though, and I'm just bawling. I just started bawling. I never thought she'd answer the phone, but I said, honey, I just thought I was going to die. I just need to hear your voice. And she was so good. You know, she's doing her own thing. She's preoccupied, but she took the time. But this was where I almost pulled the perb. In fact, during that time on those waves, the antenna kept coming up on its own. Like, is that a signal? I don't know. But I did run into a guide as I was coming out. I'll show you. So these are just some of the caves I went by. So now I'm coming out, and you see that far point? So I've now got to come from that point into Cornucopia, into this other safe harbor. So I have to make my way across that, and the waves are just, but now I'm in trailing seas. So now they're coming behind me, thank goodness, but they're still 4 and 5 foot. A couple of 6-footers would roll under me. So I came in like those guys you see in Hawaii coming in and they're outriggers. That's how I came into Cornucopia. But I passed a guide. He had a couple of people in a tandem kayak, and I said, I don't know if you want to go any further. And I saw them about 20 feet behind me turn around. So the guides, as I did come in here finally, there was a guide service that helped me out. They were going to put their kayaks up for 5 days because the weather wasn't going to change for 5 days. So they were done. So this is Eller's store in Cornucopia. This is their grain train. I walked in, I got a roast beef sandwich, a Miller High Life, some chips, and I went back to the dock. I go back to the dock, and there's a guy getting ready to get in his big fishing boat with his wife and kids, and another guy with his fishing boat and wife and kids. And I said, I don't know if you want to go out there. Oh, no. He's looking at me in my kayak like, are you a freak? So sure enough, I hear their motors go out, they get past the breakwater, and I'm not lying, within 5 minutes, they were back in. That woman hops off the front of the boat and says, we're never doing that again. And I'm not even telling the language she's using. And the guy got out very sheepishly and walked by me, and they trailered the boats and they got the hell out of there. So this is the northernmost post office in Wisconsin. And the reason I showed you the post office is because my journals and letters I was always sent back to Christine, because I didn't want them to get wet or ruined in the kayak. So now it's a short trip across the top of the Apostle Islands. I did as much as I could before the weather. I can't do it anymore. So the kayak folks I told you about, they took me over here to Bayfield. I get to Bayfield and it's Grunkies. This is a famous place. John F. Kennedy Jr. stayed in the same room I did above with his Harvard buddies when he was kayaking out there. So I stayed here for a couple of days. It was marvelous. They treated me like a king. I got free meatloaf. It was a great place. I got stormed in here 2 days. I couldn't move. Even I went to the Coast Guard and I asked them about some of the weather reports. And they said, what are you doing? I told them what I was doing. And then I said, I got to get from here because Chequamegon Bay was closed off because of a red tide of algae and they had E. coli from all the storms. They said, you can't go down there. So now I got to cross a channel, which is not easy. I got to cross a channel and get to the other part of the Apostle Islands called Long Island. So, and it's way over there. And that's Madeline Island over there, which is that's the biggest island in the Apostle Islands. So I'm ready. I'm just waiting for the weather to clear. So finally I get on the ferry and I'm getting on the ferry and there's a guy from Houghton, Michigan. He's telling me about the storms. He said, I don't know if you want to go up there. He's telling me about all the damage, but he helps me get my kayak on the boat. I give him a big hug. Turns out he's one of the specialists for the plovers. So he's marking plovers all over the Lake Superior. So I get over to Long Island. I made it. It was a 2.5 mile trek after Madeline Island. So it's about a 10-mile day before I get even here. And now we're still at like 8:30 in the morning. So I took a nap. I think I slept for like a couple hours over here. I was just exhausted. So now this is another 50-mile day. Because now I got to find a way past tribal land. So this is the Bad River tribe. So it's just pot. Oh, so now the hot tub. So halfway down, this hot tub is just on the beach. So I couldn't see what it was. So I finally got past it. And that's why I pulled the camera out because it was a fairly easy paddle. This is all shallow water. It was fairly calm, but that was a hot tub. So later on in the trip, in case I don't get to it, because I'm running over like I always do, people lost refrigerators, homes, porches, decks, hot tubs from Keweenaw all the way up to Duluth. So I was just finding this stuff now. I had no idea how it got there, but this was somebody's hot tub that had floated away. I found later up when I was on the western side of the UP, somebody lost an LP tank. They found it in Wisconsin and the Coast Guard made him pay for the recovery. And they found his refrigerator 40 feet out to sea in 20 feet of water. That's where his refrigerator was. I don't know what happened to the house. Yeah. This is 2018, the year of the massive storms. I was the only freak on the water. But I didn't plan to surf. Yeah, can you see the forests? They're all just crashed. It was amazing. This is Saxon Harbor. So that whole day I just started off with getting over to Long Island. Now I have to go down. I'm thinking Saxon Harbor. I can hear it on my radio. It's like, oh, this is a place. They probably got a store, maybe a restaurant, I can maybe do some laundry. Well, that was the harbor. They lost 91 boats and the police chief. I came in and the guy handling that one crane over here, he's like Santa Claus. He's got a beard like this. And I really thought, because it's like really late, almost at dark. And I thought I was hallucinating, but he looked like Santa Claus. He had the belly, he had the suspenders, and he's telling me the harbor's closed, the harbor's closed. I looked up, I said, I'm in a kayak. I got no place else to go. So it turns out there was one restaurant open, and it was owned by a Vietnam veteran. And he took me in, he didn't charge me for the food, and his daughters came down and helped me get my kayak through the muck. And then I was able to camp next to a couple of the boats they pulled out of the water. You can see how well my kayak fit in there. So that's where I camped. That was a bear night, by the way. I had bears around the tent that night. And he told me there were all kinds of bears in northern Wisconsin. So now I'm got to get up to, of course, Michigan. So now I'm way down here. This is where Saxon Harbor is. So now I'm on my way up. So I'm at Little Girdle Harbor up just on the far west side of the Upper Peninsula. And I didn't have any cash. I didn't carry cash. And this guy put me up at the handicap spot. He says, look, if somebody comes in, I'm gonna have to move you, but you can stay here. So I stayed here at night. I think I slept 15 hours that day. I just slept. But I had to take my kayak and sluice it down a hill of sand, at least 200 feet down. I just let the rope go in. So that's why this thing was so valuable. It could handle anything. So now I'm making my way up to Black River Harbor. Again, just rocks, but this is nice. Now I'm in Michigan, so there's nobody that owns the coast. So it's, I can land anywhere I want. And again, that's the reason I have that kayak. I'm up on rock. I'm just making my way up. And now I'm at Black River Harbor. And I get there and it's closed because of the storms. The whole water system went out. There's all kinds of trees down, so it's closed. So I didn't find anybody. So I just parked myself next to this bench. And then a bunch of rowdy guys came that night with firecrackers and paps. And it's funny, as much as I'm around animals, it's the humans that I worry the most about because I'm by myself. So I camped up on the grass in the park after they left. I just waited till they left. Now I'm making my way up toward the Porcupine Mountains. I'm at the Presqu'île River. This is one of my favorite shots. Again, I just park. And now I'm at Union Bay, up at Lake of the Clouds. And this is the kind of water I saw a lot where I couldn't take a picture. So eventually, during this storm, it was over the rocks and over the deck. So we had 20-foot waves that day eventually. So that's kind of what I was facing up in Minnesota. Yeah. So here I am sitting having coffee at Porcupine Mountains State Park. This is one of the 40-degree days. It turns out I met Steve Jakeway. If you know the Jakeways in town, I guess he's passed now, but he was sitting there and he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Well, I live in Petoskey." He says, "I'm from Petoskey." So that day he let me use his car and I went into Ontonagon and I filled up on groceries. I did my laundry. I went to Stubbs Bar that I used to go to as a kid. I had a great time. But yeah, here he is living from Petoskey right next to me. 7 billion people on the planet. He's right there. So now I'm making my way out of so that notch in the mountain back there, that's Lake of the Clouds. So the campground I was at was over near there. So now I'm coming up to Ontonagon. I'm in Ontonagon. Now I'm going through 3 more days of rain, and the guys next to me from California can't put up their tent because they're so drunk. That was the best entertainment I had on the trip. Then I walk into town and I'm literally dripping wet during the storm. I mean, it's thunder, it's lightning, I'm dripping wet, and they pass me up and they almost flip me off. They didn't even stop to give me a ride. I'm like, oh well. This was I'm up on Agate Beach. This is another time this is behind me. I'm kayaking, I'm getting chased out of the water. This is like 3 in the afternoon. So I'm getting chased out of the water. I get up, my radio starts going off, tornado warnings, this warnings. I get off, I finally get up in my tent and I just watch this go over. Now I'm at Frida. So this is a copper mine just south of Houghton and Hancock. I got off here and again, weird. A gentleman approached me and he says, "Are you the kayaker that did this back in the 90s?" I said, "No, but I know that book. I know that person. His name is Greg." He said, my great-grandfather rescued him on a really bad day. I said, "Well, here I am." So he gave me it was only 2 miles from here by road. He gave me a lift into Houghton and Hancock. The same guy, the his grandson, the guy who in the book I read. So this is the place where they lost refrigerators, LP tanks, homes, decks. The place was a mess. Now I'm in Houghton and Hancock, and I'm literally staying at the Ramada Inn right there as you cross the bridge into Hancock. That was cool. So everything got dried out. I'm hanging my tent over the shower because I'm perpetually wet. I walked through town up into the IGA, up into Hancock, and all the alleys were just decimated. The pavement was gone. There were trees down. Some of the homes were off their foundations. In Houghton, some of the stores had caved in. It was a horrid mess. And then I'm thinking about the water. I'm like, there's no boats. Why aren't there any boats? Well, it turns out they said you can't go in the water because everything is covered with E. coli. So don't be getting your drinking water out of here. So I filled up everything. I kayaked up and down, like you can't stop me. I got to go somewhere. So then it's like 13 miles from here after the kayak the other side, 13 miles from here to McLean State Park, which was a gorgeous kayak ride. But I was literally the only boat on the water. And this is July. So now I'm at McLean State Park. So I stopped here and I got to go back out and around to get to the campground. So this is where Christine picks me up in the old Honda and I put that up. She takes a picture. You see my right arm, how swollen it is. So the whole first part of the trip, I just blew all these muscles from that trip out in Minnesota. I took a lot of Motrin. Am I doing all right on time? 5 minutes? Okay, I'll quick. So this is Point Abbey. Again, some billion-year-old lava flows. This was a place I had bears here this night too because I dumped a bunch of stew into the fire. I couldn't get it all out. I kept dumping it in the waters, but there was enough scent. But there was a privy. Did I tell you there was a lot of privies I ran into? So now I'm up in Thunder Bay Inn. So another rocky day, I had to get into a Big Bay. So I get into Big Bay, all the campgrounds are full. So now I'm getting into Michigan where I don't know there's 2 million people up near Munising. So I get into Thunder Bay. So I end up staying at the Thunder Bay Inn in Henry Ford's old room up on the 2nd floor. Turns out this woman, I don't remember her name, but she had a place on Mullet Lake. So yes, that's where I was. So I stayed with Jimmy Stewart and Lee Remick for the Anatomy of the Murder, because that's where that was filmed, which is one of my favorite movies and books. So now I'm making my way down to Marquette. Those are the picnic rocks. Again, I don't see anybody in the water. And I get out and thinking, what the hell? And then I get out and it says, no swimming. 16 people have drowned here. Okay, well, I made it. So I got out. Now I'm looking for my granola bars, but just over the rise here is the burger bus. So this young woman treated me to 3 hamburgers and fries. She took my picture, and within 5 minutes, I got a note from my daughter. My daughter was a college hockey player, and she has friends up in Marquette. And within 5 minutes, I was all over the internet. So I didn't know. I didn't know. But yeah, this was great. She was so wonderful. It was the best food I had had in weeks. So now I'm in Marquette, and believe it or not, I kept having to kayak around Marquette because again, there was no place to stay. So I ended up going to a Hilton or that New Hampton Inn right there on the harbor. The woman put me up and I was able to keep my kayak in there. But again, I didn't realize the numbers of people that had been going to Marquette and Munising at that point. Turns out I found out they went through 1.5 million people at Munising that year, where the year before it was like 500,000. So now I'm stuck in this secluded beach for a couple of days. Now I get to Shelter Bay. I get off and I said, I need a place to stay. And they're just laughing at me, the charter fishermen. I said, why? Because they're Munising. It's like ants. There's people crawling in Munising. So again, I'm just, well, I'll just have to do my best. So I get back in my kayak and I end up at, oh my God, Autrain. I went up the Autrain River and I got off. They have a kayak landing. I got off. I'm looking around and I walk into the little Autrain area and there's a store. And I noticed there's this little like old motel, like the old Motel Hell places. So for $40, they gave me a room. So I dried out yet again. I wasn't able to leave here for 3 or 4 days because the storms were so bad. They shut down the entire harbor in Munising. Even the tourist boats weren't going out. So I kept going into the park trying to figure out how I was going to get through the park. And I met a guy who finally said, I can take you into the park. So he literally put my thing back into the kayak. I got through the harbor. The harbor master was willing to take me anywhere I could go. So I just got into the Pictured Rocks and I went up to Pictured Rocks and I got to Hurricane Beach. And I stayed there, did the whole lighthouse. Now I'm coming down to Grand Marais. So you probably recognize those dunes from up near Grand Marais. So when I got down through those dunes, I went through 13 squalls. But I'm in 3 feet of water and it was okay. But 13 squalls, and then it was too sunny, and then the wind would blow me backwards, and then it was sunny, and the wind would blow me backwards. So I did all of that the next day. This was the water the whole day. I get into Grand Marais, that's me, and then the wife and my sister-in-law, and then I had to do a big book talk up at Birchwood, so I didn't want to miss it. But Kristen, I'm getting ready for it, and Christine took that picture out the door because I was like, I don't know if I want to be home. And that's my trip. Sorry it took so long, Sheila.
How long was the entire trip?
2 months. 2 months, yep. Sorry I took so long, yes. You know, honestly, I didn't, because just like living in Alaska during this, in Alaska, you don't see the northern lights in the summer because it's light the whole time. But up there, it doesn't get dark till 11 or 11:30. And honestly, I was out. Even when I would wake up at 3 in the morning to check my boat to make sure the waves weren't pulling it away, or if I had a bear outside and I just was checking my food, I still didn't see any. No, I did not. Yes. No, I never carried a gun in the backcountry. Even in Alaska where it's legal, I've just never wanted to. Why? You know, that's everybody's, especially nowadays, everybody's first reaction is to pull out a GD gun. When I was a copper in Ann Arbor, we had community policing. We were only allowed to carry 38s because guns were the last thing you thought about. Now it's the first thing people think about. And even in the backcountry, once up in Alaska not too long ago, a bear came down to the shore and everybody yanked out their 357s. So what are you going to do? Shoot the black bear going for salmon? Yeah. So no, I have never wanted to carry anything in the backcountry. I figured if I can't make it out, I shouldn't be back there. I get it, but if you know what you're doing, first of all, most of the bears I've come across, that gun's not going to do squat. And I just am careful. I know the sense, I know the areas, I know places to avoid. You can sense, at least I can, as I'm lucky, I can sense when things are around me. I've just always been careful, and knock on wood. I've had moose like literally from here to here on a bike ride. I look over and they're in the willows. I mean, I've been around so many animals, I almost feel like I'm blessed somehow. But no, never carried a weapon. Yes. Well, I just did St. Mary's Lake at Glacier, Lake McDonald. I did Yellowstone Lake. I've done a lot since. The next trip I really want to do is I've done the entire Tequendon River. But I'd like to do from Whitefish Point down through the Lesh Nose and then through under the bridge and then come up right here in the harbor. I'd like to do that trip. You had a question. Food? So I would try to take 3 to 4 days with me, but I eat a lot of calories. So I kept running out of food, but I always had extra peanut butter and extra granola. So whenever I could stop, even though I may be full, I filled up on food. And one thing I found that was interesting, I stay away from processed foods, but I found Hormel chili wasn't too bad. Boy, did I eat a lot of Hormel chili in the last part of that trip. When Christine came to get me and McLean, she says, my God, I had lost 15 pounds. I lost all my body fat. She says, you look great, but you need food. So she took me to the grocery store and loaded me up. I said, honey, I can't carry that much. But we got some more food. So 3 to 4 days is what I would travel with. And just hope for the best. Anything else? Anything off the chapter thing you want me to comment real quick about? Sheila's probably going to chase me off the stage here. Yes. From that trip? Just that they were around the tent. You know, they usually, they nose everything. But all my food was at least 100 yards away in the bulkheads and in the sea bags. So I actually never had to hang it either. And they didn't claw through my kayak. In Alaska, I would have done it completely different. I would have had a bear container. And at the pictured rocks, they had bear lockers for your food. So, so nothing in person or nothing horrible, just at night. The coyotes are the most hysterical. Lots of eagles, you know. So all my bear encounters have pretty much been in the Tetons Glacier or Alaska. And those have been pretty close. Have I written? Well, I've got these chapters. I wrote these raw. They need heavy editing. My editor retired. I have a new editor for my latest books, but I don't know what to do with these. You know, there's a lot of stuff in there. People are going to like and dislike, and I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, it's the draft is done. Wayne State had them for a long time. A couple of years ago, sent them back and told me to rewrite them. I rewrote them, sent them back, and now they got all new interns because that's who looks at them. And they said, yeah, nobody even reads these anymore. So nobody reads anything. It's all podcasts and TikTok. I mean, it's the whole author world is a different world right now. Anything else before Sheila yanks me off with the hook? Really, thank you so much for being here. That was marvelous.
Tom, thank you so